This video explains how to update firmware on an AlphaPix Evolution controller. A few words of caution. If your controller is working perfectly fine in your display, especially as you may be reaching a peak season and your show is about to start, we do not recommend updating firmware. We recommend updating firmware when there's a known issue or you've been instructed to update firmware. Of course, you can always update your firmware at any point. Just navigate to our website and go to HolidayCoro.com/firmware, and that will bring you to the firmware update page. Here you'll be asked for some information here, and go ahead and complete that. And then the next is we're going to get information here asking, and this is required, for why you're asking to update it, because we get a lot of customers who update thinking that the firmware solves a problem that it doesn't. And we would estimate in over 60% of the cases, firmware does not solve a problem with a customer's issue. Okay, now the first thing we need to do is we've got lots of different controllers here in different versions, and they all have different firmware, and it's very critical for us to get the right firmware. Putting the wrong firmware on the controller can damage it permanently. Now, what you want to do is ideally look for the part number. In this particular case, it's printed here. CPU part number 951-12, HolidayCoro AlphaPix Evolution Revision 2. Now, what we want to do is go ahead and find that, and it's right here. Now, in this particular case, you can see we have two of these units, one for AC, which has its own unique firmware, and this one for use with any pixels. And you can see that they have different version numbers for the software. All right, you would then go ahead, complete your information up here, and complete this portion right here, and next enter your email address, and we will email you the updated firmware. So go ahead and do this before you update or ask to update your firmware on your controller. Okay, so once you have your firmware, you can navigate over here if you have access to the web interface, and we will show you another method to which you can trigger the firmware update. And in this particular case, I'm already connected to the controller, and I'm going to scroll down to the bottom. If you ever need the link for the firmware, you can click there. That'll just bring you to HolidayCoro.com/firmware. And then once you are ready, go ahead and click the download button, and this will put the controller into firmware acceptance mode. And you can see here that it's ready to take firmware. Now, if you've done this incorrectly and you clicked it, you didn't mean to, you can go ahead and press the M, which is on the left-hand side right here, and that will exit the mode for firmware update and allow you just to go back to regular operation. All right, so once we're at the next screen, we will see a dialog that allows us to select our firmware. Of course, we're going to select this from our PC, from where we've downloaded it. So go ahead and say Choose File, select the file name. Of course, if you have multiple versions of firmware, make sure that it is in fact the right firmware. All right, once you have that, go ahead and open that. Then click Update. The controller will install the updated firmware and provide a confirmation and reboot. Now, your settings will remain the same under a normal firmware update. You will not have to reset up or change the IP address of your controller after a firmware update. All right. Now, another method to update your firmware, if you cannot get to the web interface, is the factory firmware update request. And we do that by pressing all three of these buttons, the M, S, and OK button in succession while applying power. So that means we need to power off, and we're going to go ahead and unplug the controller. And once it powers down, again, we're going to press the M, S, and OK buttons just straight across the side, all three, while plugging in the controller. Continue to hold those buttons down. The controller will boot up. Now, you'll notice that it says the default IP has been used. It is 192.168.0.50. When you do a factory update for firmware, you will have to configure your network or PC to access this particular location on the IP address. You will then be able to access that IP address and then update the firmware. So make sure that you're in the right subnet and IP. Do not set your computer to the same IP address of 192.168.0.50. That's how we update firmware.